everyone, if you could please take your seats. We're going to get started pretty soon here. Okay, as we're all filtering in, I just wanted to take a moment to once again thank all of our sponsors for this conference, at all of our various levels, and as well also our in-kind sponsors. Without them, this isn't possible, and we really appreciate the support of all of them, so thank you to them. And since this is the last time we're all going to be gathered in the same room together, I just want to once again thank everybody that has made this conference possible, all of our organizing committee, volunteers, the SCB&A board, SCB Global Board as well. So thank you to them. Please give a round of applause for everybody who's made this possible. So just a couple more things to note. We do have a closing reception tonight at the Steam Whistle Brewery. It's not in this venue. It's about a 7 to 10 minute walk just straight down the street. And if you have questions about where it is, please check with concierge. It is a sold out event, so please have your ticket with you if you plan to attend. If you lost it, we'll have a list for you, so don't worry about that. And for any of you joining us tomorrow, we're going to have some great field trips, workshops, short courses, so we're happy to see you for one more day. And to everybody else, safe travels. It has been an amazing time with you this week. We're so happy to have so many of you here. We hope you will join us next year in Malaysia for ICCB, the International Congress, and in 2020 for NACCB. We'll announce the location of that at a later date, so stay tuned. And we're going to turn it over now to the recent Vice President of Education and Outreach for SCB, Jackie Grant, to hand out and announce the Student Presentation Awards.
All right, thank you, Jamie, and welcome everyone. Welcome all to the students. We really appreciate your contributions as developing scientists and established scientists. All students are fantastic, and we are really glad that you come and participate here in the conference. So I would like to just start out with announcing all the winners. And as I announce your name, would you please head over to Steve Trombulak, who's the chair of the North American Section Education Committee, and he has a selection of books that he will distribute as part of the prizes associated with winning an award for a student presentation. And there's a second award, which involves you as the winner going to the University of Chicago Press booth and selecting a book from them. And they will give you the details when you get to the booth. All right, so let's go ahead and start. Our first winner is for the best poster presentation, Sebastian Thies, or Thays. Is Sebastian here? Let's give him a round of applause. And how do I say your last name, Sebastian? Tice. So we debated all three this morning, and I only gave the first two. So Sebastian Tice, thank you very much. Okay. Our second winner for the best poster with a conservation application is Hannah Rosner-Katz. Is Hannah here? Hannah? And please stay with Stephen. We'll be taking a photo after all the prizes are announced. Our third student winner for best full-length presentation is Kazmira Cockrell. Kazmira, thank you. Our fourth student winner for Best Full-Length Presentation with a Conservation Application is Dalal Hannah. Dalal, are you here? Fabulous. And for our final two, the Best Speed Presentation is awarded to Megan Jones. Congratulations. And finally, our Best Speed Presentation with a Conservation Application is awarded to Courtney Larson. Congratulations to all of you. We'll take a brief break for a photo opportunity, and then who's next? Okay, Soraya and Ashley will introduce the next group while we're taking the photo. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We're here to talk a little bit about the working groups at the Society for Conservation Biology. And if you don't know, working groups are a bunch of people that felt that something else beyond what CB was already doing needed to be done, usually on our areas of expertise. And so today we're just going to go through all the working groups that are already existing in the society that all of you can join. You can be members of multiple working groups, and it would be great because we do cool things, and we will be happy to have more people involved. So this is the working group that I'm associated with. This is the Conservation Genetics Working Group, which I'm the president of, and this is the board member here just in Toronto last few nights ago. And what we're trying to do with the Conservation Genetics Working Group is trying to promote the use of genetics within the society, trying to educate and increase genetic literacy within the members. And we'll be talking to you guys, if you want to, about it at the booth that we have. And all the working groups are going to be there during this morning. Then there is also the Conservation Marketing Working Group that tries to use the latest techniques and studies about how to motivate people and to change their behavior and how to outreach to the public in a more engaging way. They do promote awareness and acceptance and use of scientifically supported conservation marketing techniques to achieve biodiversity and environmental conservation goals. And this year they're having, hopefully, their first international congress in Virginia. So stay tuned for that. There's also the Coral Reef Working Group, which aims at integrating coral reef conservation science into policy and management actions, and also trying to engage students and early career conservationists to build capacity for this specific theme. And of course, like all of us, they're looking for people. So if you're interested in coral reefs, you should go to their website, to their page. Then there's also the Participatory and Citizen Science Group that facilitates participatory and citizen science research and practice and aids the preservation of Earth's biodiversity. And the Conservation Technology Working Group that is leading a broad conversation about conservation community, what they want in terms of technology. And these are actually their pictures, which are pretty cool, and try to identify opportunities and threats that are emerging and that technology could help bridge. And now I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Hi, my name is Ashley Dare. I'm the president of the Social Science Working Group, and I get to introduce the second half of the working groups. So the Social Science Working Group has three main outcomes that we aim for. One related to science, advancing the scientific understanding of conservation as a social process and the role that our disciplines of conservation and social science play in that. The second related to policy, informing decision-making through scientific dialogue and stakeholder engagement. And the third being capacity building, enhancing the ability of scholars and practitioners to understand and address the social dimensions of biodiversity conservation. SSWG has been around for 15 years, so it is now our 15th anniversary. And we are also quite active on social media, so I encourage you to check out our Twitter feed right now during the conference and other ways to get involved. The Freshwater Working Group is a working group that promotes effective freshwater ecosystem conservation, science, and scholarship. They meet several times a year, organizing symposia on freshwater issues and promoting community engagement in freshwater issues. The Religion and Conservation Biology Working Group aims to strengthen the collaboration between faith traditions and conservation, promote awareness of the importance of this collaboration within SCB and the conservation community based on empirical evidence. And the Urban Ecology Working Group shares ideas and information regarding human-wildlife conflict, disruptions to predator-prey dynamics, unintentional invasive species introductions, and environmental justice issues. And they encourage interested SCB members to engage and collaborate on research and projects to push the needle on urban issues. And the Impact Evaluation Working Group is the newest working group within the Society. They support the adoption of quantitative and qualitative counterfactual approaches to understand the social and ecological impacts of conservation interventions. And they build relationships with impact evaluators in other disciplines and work to build an active community of counterfactual thinkers within SCB. So with that, just a reminder that all of those working groups are open to SCB members, and they are not specific to just the North American section, but they transcend globally. And you can join those working groups by going to your membership profile within SCB and clicking that you would like to be a member of those working groups, which will allow you to get in touch with them, as well as they all maintain web pages within the SCB website, another way for you to find contacts there. And many of them have committee structures as a way to engage. So with that introduction to the working groups, we're now going to turn over to the main part of the plenary today. And it's my honor to introduce Sergio Avila, who will be our moderator for the session today. Sergio.
Thank you, guys.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días. I'm going to invite our panelists to invite me at the table. No worries, it's okay. We're all good. So join me, please, as I introduce you. Before we start with the plenary, welcome to the last day of NACCB 2018, last plenary. I want to acknowledge and recognize all of the people that have worked in this conference, organizing this conference. But I am going to publicly embarrass and make her stand up and give her another very strong round of applause to Jamie Hochberg for putting this whole thing together. I'm very proud of you. I think you're doing a great job. It's great. We are going to have a wonderful panel today to speak about equity, inclusivity, and diversity. And I would like to introduce my speakers today. This will be a conversation, and it's important for you to understand that equity, inclusion, and diversity are ongoing conversations. You will not learn everything in an hour and a half, and you will not be able to ask all your questions. And it is important that you continue this conversation. But we want to make this interactive, and to make it interactive, if you hear something that resonates with you, I invite you to share sparkles, which is what organizers do when they hear something. You do this, and you're sending a message to the speaker that what they are saying is resonating with you right now. Does that work? All right. First, I'm going to introduce, thank you. I'm going to introduce Jackie Patterson, who is Senior Director of the NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Program. Jackie Patterson has worked as a researcher, program manager, coordinator, advocate, and activist working on women's rights, violence against women, HIV and AIDS, racial justice, economic justice, and environmental and climate justice. Since 2007, Patterson has served as coordinator and co-founder of the Women of Color United. Patterson holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Maryland and a master's degree in public health from Johns Hopkins University. She currently serves on the International Committee on the U.S. Social Forum, the Steering Committee for the Interfaith Moral Action on Climate, the Advisory Board for the Center for Earth Ethics, as well as on boards of directors for the Institute of the Black World, the Center for Story-Based Strategy, Grid Alternatives, the River Network, the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, Fresh Coast Capital, and the National Blackwater Center. Right? Excellent. We also have with us Anna Luz Porzekanski, Director at the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation of the American Museum of Natural History. As director of this center, Dr. Porzekanski oversees the strategic planning, project development, and multidisciplinary staff leading conservation research and capacity development initiatives worldwide. As a conservation biologist, researcher, and professional educator, her primary interests relate to understanding biodiversity and how to sustain it effectively for the future through evidence-based management and capacity development. And finally, Charles Orgon III. He is a recent presidential leadership scholar, graduate from University of Georgia, where he obtained an undergraduate degree in environmental economics and management. Charles' journey as an environmentalist began in 2008. He was only 12 years old. Charles noticed his school's littering problem and wanted to organize a student-led effort to resolve the problem. He later developed Greening Forward, which would become a leading organization in the United States that's devoted to training and funding student environmental leaders ages 5 to 25. Greening Forward helps students tackle environmental challenges in their own communities and around the world. Most recently, Charles completed an Arctic science expedition which has helped inform his role as an informal environmental educator and has integrated his award-winning blueprint for youth environmental leadership into Chilean and Colombian school systems. Charles' work is validated by over 31 local, national, and international awards, 5 book mentions, and over 100 speaking engagements since 2010. In February of 2018, Charles began working at Deloitte Touche LLP as a business consultant, where he will bring his nonprofit sector experience to the business world. The example that Charles sets has inspired countless youth to follow his footsteps. Charles, Orgon. After this introduction, since you know a lot of what they do and what they work on, I also want to let you know that as we will make this session interactive, there will be an online poll that you will be able to participate on your phone. We will explain how that's going to work, but you will be part of this. And I want to acknowledge Suzanne Macy for helping us with the poll. Thank you so much. I'm going to give our speakers 3 minutes to introduce their topic and tell us everything about equity. Anna, would you like to go first?
I'm happy to go first. I think what you asked us to do first is talk about who we are, right?
Oh.
Is that right?
Absolutely. I want you to say who you are, what you do, and why are you here.
Absolutely. So among the things that make up my identity, I identify as a cis woman, a mother, a scientist and environmentalist, a leader, an immigrant, but a very privileged immigrant. So my husband calls me a primigrant. I'm a Uruguayan of recent European and Middle Eastern roots, and also a new American, a secular Jew, a world citizen. And in terms of race and ethnicity, I identify as a white Latina. So that's how I identify myself, but I am many things to many people. So some seem to count me as a person of color, for example, but I don't claim to share like the majority of experiences that brown and black people face growing up in the United States. And so I don't identify as a person of color. So identity is kind of fluid. So that's who I am, or how I would like to introduce myself in that respect. Should I go a little bit more into why I'm here, or you want?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, the way I introduce myself should give you some hints about the kind of life experiences that have shaped how I approach diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I come from an immigrant family that has immigrated in my generation, my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation. I grew up hearing about their immigration sagas from multiple places in Europe due to persecution. I also spent most of my childhood in Brazil with my family there due to my parents' political persecution in the 70s. And then I immigrated to the United States. I'm making a new life for myself here. I'm raising 2 American daughters. And I'm learning a lot about American history through their eyes as they go through the American school system, because I didn't really study the deep history of racism in the United States, for example, growing up. So I'm learning a lot of this growing up here. I've also trained and worked as a woman in science, which has been both challenging and very rewarding. And during my last 15-something years of working in capacity development and conservation, I've worked with colleagues all over the world from multiple cultures. And so all of this has led me to care about pluralism and social justice, and I want to make society at large and my field more inclusive and equitable for all. And at the center, we're doing this by transforming knowledge into conservation action with a commitment to equity. And we have Inclusive Conservation Communities Initiative, which I will tell you more about the work we do in just a moment.
Thank you, Anna.
That's why I'm here, I think,
Thank
all
you.
of that.
Thank you. Jackie.
Okay, sure. Hi, my name is Jackie Patterson, and I was born in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, and I was born to a African-American mom who migrated from Mississippi to Chicago through the Great Migration, as they call it, although I don't think it was that great. But, also to a father who is immigrated from Jamaica, and so that's my immediate family. And then, of course, my lineage traces back to folks who involuntarily migrated to the United States from to Jamaica from the continent. So, of Africa, of sub-Saharan Africa in particular. I identify as Christian and as what else? As my pronouns are she and her. And I've worked through my career in starting with doing, well, really wanted to be an ice cream lady initially. That was my, but then, once I got over that.
There's still time.
Right, there's still time. I've been making retirement, yeah. But eventually had to give up that dream and become a special education teacher. And so I went to Peace Corps actually in Jamaica, because Jamaica unfortunately has a high rate of attrition in terms of people dropping out of Peace Corps from Jamaica at that time. And so they thought since I was Jamaican, I might be able to make it. And so I did indeed, and actually extended. So I was there for 4 years, serving as, did a training for teachers, for regular education teachers who needed to integrate kids with special needs into their classrooms. And as a secondary project, I did environmental work, working with a community where their water supply had been contaminated by Shell oil. And so that was my first introduction to environmental work. And I was part of this organization called the Center for Environmental, Center for Environmental Resources. And so we not only did that work, but expanded in terms of responding to the pollution, but expanded into doing more conservation work, connecting children with their understanding of their environment and so forth. So that was at the beginning of my path to doing work on environmental justice issues. Fast forward, I studied social work and public health, and started to do work around, first with groups like Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, and doing it kind of from my desk, but then quickly moving into doing international work around public health, HIV and AIDS, infectious diseases overseas, and then that led me to do work around gender justice. And in between, I spent 6 weeks in New Orleans working on the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and in New Orleans and Houston at a disaster recovery centers there. And there I really started to see the differential impact of climate change on communities of color and other special needs groups. I ended up being, after taking 1 semester of sign language in undergrad, I ended up being the sign language interpreter for the entire disaster recovery center. And there were a significant number number of people with hearing loss that were there. And I remember, I'll never forget, at one point, when we were kind of trying to troubleshoot before I became the interpreter, we were trying to troubleshoot what to do about this large hard of hearing population that needed to be serviced. And one person said, well, they can just call the TTY line, and I'm like, well, no, they can't call. That's the issue. And so that again really starts to get at when you don't have people who are representing groups that are most in need at the table and making decisions and giving input, what the outcomes end up being. You get me, who is finger spelling the entire time, trying to interpret with my limited number of signs, for this entire group of people who were in dire need, people who just walked in with flip-flops on because they had lost everything and had to move. And so there I was trying to interpret for them. And that really, for me, was one of the many case in point moments of why it is that we need to really be practicing diversity on multiple levels and diversity, equity, inclusion, and decision making. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jackie.
Sure.
Thank you. There is a running theme I already see there. It's called burden. Charles.
Yes. So for the past decade, since I was in middle school, I've been organizing young people around environmental issues in their communities. I created an organization called Greening Forward that helps young people take action against the issues that they care about in the world. And when I worked with my team to develop our organization's strategy, equity was at the center of it, because we believe that when you create an equitable system, then diversity and inclusion should be easier outcomes as well. So we translated our curriculum leadership materials into Spanish, and we made them culturally relevant. We also thought about representation of diverse communities and how that played out in the work that we did. We built grassroots partnerships and developed campaigns where our partners were involved in the design and the decision-making level within our organization. When we thought about building our team of other high school and college students, making sure that we were building a team that was competent in cultural diversity was really important to us as well. And we were also really intentional about making our conference events and programs in communities of color, even when mainstream environmental organizations used coded language like, oh, that's dangerous community or an unsafe community, and we proved them wrong, and people still came to our programs. But I didn't actually realize that what we were doing was DEI. I didn't call it that for the last half of what we were doing. And so I read an article on GRIS by Marcelo Bonta and Charles Jordan that had some ideas on how we can address diversity, equity, inclusion in the environmental movement, specifically our diversity deficit that we have. And one of the solutions they had was we can engage in meaningful and substantive ways young people. And when we do that, we can also address the diversity deficit that our movement is facing, because today's generation of young people are more multicultural than ever before in history. So as a part of that, I began talking more around this language of DEI and helping organizations develop youth advisory councils, positions for young people on their board of directors, conducting DEI audits. I worked with government, the U.S. Forest Service Region 1 around a communications-related DEI project, and the Obama administration's Office of Science and Technology Policy around youth voice and their work, and also helping philanthropists understand how they can give their money directly to young people and the impact that that could make as well. But as I thought about over the years the impact that I wanted to make, I considered that of the largest 100 economies of the world, 31 are countries and 69 are corporations. So now I bring my nonprofit experience into the corporate world with my Fortune 500 companies working as a consultant for Deloitte.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for your intros. So this is the time where we are going to invite you to play with us. And I want to thank Suzanne for helping us with the poll. This is something that I have never done, but I'm very excited to see, and I'm happy that you will all be part of it. So our first question we're going to ask you, and we're going to I'll give you some time to follow some instructions that Suzanne is going to give us, is going to be defining inclusion.
Yes. Okay. So I don't know how many people have used this online platform called Poll Everywhere, maybe in a classroom or a workshop. But this is one of those opportunities where we're actually going to ask you to take out your devices, whether it be your phone or your laptop. And at the top of this screen, I think this is a laser, you'll see a website. Oops. It's polev.com/Charles ORGBO701. Charles has been nice enough to donate his online account for this, so thank you very much, Charles. So I'll give you a moment to go ahead and put that into your search field, and it'll come up. And the whole point of Poll Everywhere is so we can get a wide diversity of participation in this. And the question that you can see here is, how do you define inclusion, up at the top? And when you get to the website, there'll be an open field for you just to free response, and go ahead and type in your response. As you can see, we have 2 examples that are already flashing up, and as people start to send in, you'll notice that there'll be more going. Oh, that did not activate.
It says unfortunately.
Disconnected. Oh no, let's try that again. So for those who don't have internet connection, let me show you how it's done. You go to the meeting room, West End, you hit connect.
Excellent.
And then hopefully what will happen is it will connect, and you may then get a prompt to enter a password, which I will show you in a moment. It says it's connected because I already entered the password, but it's NACCB 2018 if you haven't.
There we go.
So it says now that I'm connected. Let's get out of that. I'm going to hit this little button right here to activate the poll so it can start. I apologize for those who were so good and already typed it in. Let's see if it retroactively can absorb those. But
Don't worry, we planned this time for the plenary to happen.
We really wanted you all to have a chance to also put it in your own words, right?
Yeah.
That was really important for us.
That is important.
okay, here they start coming.
Before we tell you what we think, that was the whole.
You see them starting to scroll through. Everyone feels safe. Those that want to participate can participate. All are welcome
There's
and
an
listen
idea.
no matter what. Getting all voices to the table. Welcoming. All people and perspectives are welcomed. Everyone not only has a seat at the table, but also has an opportunity to speak and be heard, providing a feeling of safety and respect for everyone.
Like it.
We
Let's
have,
talk about it.
They're still coming in, providing a feeling of safety. Everyone is working together. And what's nice about this is that we'll have all of these responses in the end, that we can go around and look for similarities and really get an understanding of the overall feel for the entire room. So we're up to 113. This is great.
Wow, thank you, everyone.
And so what's nice about this is that now our panelists will be able to take the existing knowledge that already exists in the room and the perspectives that are here, and then adapt their responses based on the information of the audience. So hopefully you feel like you have the seat at this table and you're being listened to. So.
And keep it open, or keep your phone handy, right? 'Cause
Yeah, we'll
there's
keep
a
it
couple
open.
more coming later.
There will be a
They'll
quiz.
pop up, but we're going to actually switch over so you can see the speakers, and so you're not distracted by them popping up, but they will continue to record, so thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Well, let's discuss some of those answers that we saw. I remember seeing perspectives are welcome. People who want to participate can participate. Does anybody want to jump in any of those? I'm kind of teeing it up.
I have something I wrote that I'd like to share about diversity, inclusion, and equity. Maybe I guess.
Please.
Instead of defining them, I thought it would be useful to think about what you should ask yourself if you care about diversity. So, for example, if you care about diversity, you ask yourself, how do I build a more diverse team or a field? And so that's a question of recruitment, really. right? And you can measure it very easily. If you care about inclusion, you may ask yourself, how do I make everyone in my team or field feel welcome and valued? And that's very different because it's not that easy to just a number, right? And then if you care about equity, you may ask yourself, does everyone who interacts with me and my organization, be it applicants, colleagues, those we serve, those we partner with, and ultimately everyone feel that they have equal opportunities? So that's one way I think about it.
Okay. Jackie?
I'll chime in.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually just came from a meeting in DC that was a DEI roundtable, and before we kicked off, we had a conversation about trigger words, and someone from the indigenous community said, I hope that we don't use the word pipeline, because pipeline to me is triggering. And someone else had said, I hope we don't use the word diversity. And we're at a DEI meeting, and I'm like, how do we not use the word diversity? And it took some investigating a little bit more, but really what that person was saying was diversity has become the hot topic that we don't even move beyond diversity. I think diversity is first step one. And then when we start talking about meaningful, substantive, and institutional change, we're really looking at equity and inclusion. And so people stay at this conversation of diversity and they don't move beyond that. Because diversity changes the staff photo, but equity and inclusion makes sure that those diverse faces can one day be the CEO, can one day be the president.
Verna Myers, who has a wonderful YouTube talk and has done a lot of work in this field, said diversity is being asked to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. I like that one.
Inequity is playing the right music that you know how to dance.
Yeah, or maybe where you hold the party, right?
Yeah.
Where you hold the party, how you advertise for the party.
Yeah.
Let's keep thinking about party. I like the spirit.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I wrote an article last year after kind of being the shoulder that many people have cried on who have been kind of the victims of diversity efforts in different organizations. And the article was diversity is not enough, and done alone it can be counterproductive.
Right.
And so it really kind of calls up some of the challenges with just doing diversity in terms of, as you say, changing the staff photo, but not really doing the work around actually integrating an anti-oppression frame and set of values and goals as an organization, as well as making sure that that there's space to really talk about the fact that we're all raised in a racist, patriarchal, et cetera, society, and that we all exhibit ways that we oppress in different ways through language and interactions and so forth. A little thing that I would have shown you if we had been done this a different way is this racial tension headaches commercial that Queen Latifah did on Saturday Night Live at one point, and it's pretty funny. I definitely advise you to look that up and check it out. But I'm reminded of this quote, just on kind of talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I often add leadership as well. And this quote from Martin Luther King: "I'm not going to sit at your table," not Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. "I'm not going to sit at your table and watch you eat with nothing on my plate and call myself a diner. Sitting at the table doesn't make you a diner." So just being there, is not quite enough. We really have to think about the quality of how people are there and the quality of how people are included in decision-making and so forth.
Thank you. That's so important, and I agree, especially in a group where we base our life on protecting biodiversity, and we are so good at speaking for snail and fish and bears, and yet not everybody is at the table speaking about their own communities, or being the authors of the papers, or being the ones who get the diplomas. I think that's part of it. Shall we play with our second question? Thank you. So our second question is going to be
I'll get it up and going.
on the screen.
So you'll see some other ones popping up. They're still going. I'm going to switch to the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
It's a little bit different. This one is going to be a ranking. And so with 1 being the sad face and 5 being the happy face, on the scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied with your organization's efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI? And you can see there's little points popping up
Oh, they
to
get like
show.
acne. Acne. Oh, that's interesting.
I wonder if the middle range here means that people are not sure or perhaps don't have a clear idea of what they should expect, right? I think this is something we could talk about as well.
Yeah. Can someone who's in the middle range tell us why they chose the middle range?
Just one. Here in front. Thank you, Suzanne.
I'm at the University of Washington, Bothell, in the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences, and we've been deeply committed to social justice, and we've been doing a lot of work in trying to change what we do in terms of our students and our work with communities and with each other as staff and faculty, and yet we have a hell of a long way to go.
Great.
So in her case, it's like we're really not there yet. But I think other people may not even know what to expect or what should be expected. And I think we're all here because we also want to collectively think about what should SEB be thinking about as a society, right?
Correct.
That's really important, I think. And so one thing I wanted to mention is that, you know how I mentioned those questions at the beginning, like if you care about diversity, you might ask, who's on the staff photo? If you care about inclusion, are people feeling welcome and valued? And there was just on that question, there was a very interesting session yesterday, Black in Biodiversity, where folks shared some very personal, experiences about when they felt welcomed and when they didn't. And so I think it's something, these are conversations that are difficult and uncomfortable, but important and valuable if we care about how we do our work. And so in addition to asking those questions, we should also be asking ourselves, I think as a field, does our field reflect and perpetuate in a way kind of legacies of colonialism and racism or other forms of discrimination? Or is it contributing to move us past those, right? In everything we do, in how we frame our work and the language we use, who's leading the work, the products of our research, I think that's the reflection that needs to be ongoing.
I'm super excited to kind of just hear, and there will be time for questions and comments, because the issues around DEI can be very organization specific, but we can also learn from what you guys are doing and where you guys may have questions as well.
Yeah. One of the things that just came up, and if we have time, I think it'd be great to address is, why is this personal? Why is this work personal for us? Why are we so emotional? Should we jump on that one?
Yeah, as an environmentalist, when I first started, I was using terms like earth savers, like we are earth savers, let's go out and save the earth. But as I learned more, I realized that the earth has been here for a very long time, and humans have not been here for a very long time. It's really humans that we have to be saving. It's really ourselves. And we can't do that if we can't recognize the value of every single human being and their lived experience. So I like to say I'm a people hugger, not a tree hugger.
Nice. Excellent.
I liked a little comment that happened in a session yesterday that Valerie Courtois was moderating, and she's an Indigenous leader, and she was talking about how she's a land use planning nerd, but that the term is not very sexy. And somebody said, well, let's talk about land relationship instead. And I really like that because I think that's also what we're talking about is what relationships do we want? And then you get into environmental justice for sure, because what relationships do we want all communities to have with their environment?
Correct.
Yeah, I was moderating a panel at this youth conference. It was called Power Shift, and a youth group that's concerned about climate change. And we were talking about environmental justice issues, and one person stood up in the audience, and she's like, "You've been talking about people. What about the plants and the animals and the, so forth. And what about the wild spaces that we need to preserve? And one of our panelists, who was from an environmental justice community, started crying in her response and said, that all the resources in this work are going towards saving, you're talking about organizations that have upwards of $1 billion budget, while some of the environmental justice organizations are scrambling with, with thousands of dollar kind of budgets. And so she said she would love to be out in the wilderness enjoying the beautiful spaces, but she's just trying to survive. So that's just not even within her realm of thinking. And so this is where we're really trying to reconcile. How do we bring this kind of preservation and appreciation? Every year, after I'm working around the clock every day, all day, every year I take a month and I just literally go and rent a place by the water in the tropics and just stare at the water for the entire 30 days and then come back. And so, but for me, it really is healing and restorative and just really enjoying those nature. And so in order for us to have that ability to be able to enjoy this kind of harmony and relationship with the earth, we really have to figure things in a different way, because it's a luxury, and I feel privileged to be able to do that. But most of the folks that I deal with and work with on a daily basis aren't even close to being able to have that type of luxury, and that's the kind of work we need to do in order to have earth rights and human rights working in concert.
Yeah, and I think we can do that, right? Can we talk a little bit about that,
Please.
about environmental
Yes.
justice? And because we've been doing a little talking in advance, and we were thinking about it, and, where does social justice and environmental justice overlap? You were talking about that after one of the plenaries, and where does environmental justice and conservation overlap? And we were thinking about it the other day. I was thinking that I think they all overlap. It's all like 3 overlapping circles. And yes, I do think that conservation can and should embrace them all, because can we really be effective if we're not addressing issues of equity and inclusion? I don't feel that we can. That's not to say, however, that everybody needs to be working and doing conservation biology, social justice, and environmental justice, but I think there is a space that we can explore where that can happen, and I think we should. I also think anybody who's just doing conservation biology should explore the environmental justice and social justice dimensions of their work. They should be aware of it. And so it's not like everybody needs to be doing everything, but I think we can have a broader tent, and I think we can broaden what we mean, really, by conservation and our goals. I noticed there was no environmental justice working group. Am I right about that? How about we get one? Right? That's a way we could start. And so,
Are you volunteering to lead that?
I'm definitely not an expert, but I'm happy to learn. In fact, I learned a lot just preparing for this panel and listening to everybody. But yeah, yes, I'm interested in being part of it, but I don't think I can lead it, because I think we need that expertise. Why wouldn't we want more expertise and skills in our field?
Great. Should we run into the third question? This is the last question, everybody. Don't worry. There's not going to be a test at the end or anything. I do appreciate everybody is so focused. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and the last question is, what are some specific actions you would like to see your organization doing around DEI? We have one already that's asking job applicants about their cultural competencies. Start talking about it. Well, that's a good start, yeah. Asking job applicants, that's the same one.
Well, maybe people need a moment to think about that.
Acknowledge we have an issue. Some formal statements and HR policies focus on structural change, not on superficial issues. Recognizing that inequality is a real problem. Increase pay. Integrating DEI into every syllabus. Stop unpaid internships.
Wow. Right on.
Provide current staff with cultural competency training.
Yes.
Expand work areas to include social and environmental justice. Listen. Move beyond diversity to actually address issues of inclusion and equity. Being more inclusive of discipline diversity. Making DEI efforts more transparent. Hiring more POC faculty, tenure track, not adjunct. Training on microaggressions. Recruiting high school students of color into their sciences. Learning, training about unconscious bias. Address power dynamics and funding. Action taken on individuals that have been identified as making people uncomfortable or making inappropriate comments.
Call them out.
Diversity statements, learning styles, accessibility improvements. Actually acting on policy. Do one more. A DEI inventory where we can go as an organization and develop steps forward. And again, we'll keep this poll open, so if you think of things and you want to put it up, we'll be able to collect that. And I'll pass it back to the panel.
Thank you, Suzanne.
I definitely want to call out the last one, the one that we didn't get to read, actively dismantle white supremacy.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that one.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Acknowledge that there is a system of oppression and not everybody, the field is not leveled, which might address the fact that an answer was, if they want to participate, they can participate, and that might be an idea that is not right. No?
That came up at the beginning, you're saying. But I think we were just referring to the fact that if they want to participate, they can. It's not like everybody must.
Correct. No, but what I'm trying to say is that the understanding is that if they want to participate, they might not have the special shoes to get there, or the skis, or the mountain bike.
They might not know the unwritten rules.
Exactly.
Unwritten rules.
So not everybody starts at the same level of knowledge.
Yeah. I don't know, you guys want to make a comment? I wanted to say a little bit about what we've tried to do at the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation, because it could be a useful example, not to say that we are, we have it all figured out, by no means, but is it valuable, I think, to share a little bit about our work, and then, you guys can tell how you envision it playing, but, we do our work. We have this Inclusive Conservation Communities initiative, which was definitely not started by me. It was spearheaded and inspired by Michael Foster, whom many of you may have met. He unfortunately passed away, but he was very inspirational to all of us. And wonderful leaders of that initiative are sitting in the audience here, who are my colleagues, like Dr. Raywin Grant and Eleanor Sterling. And we do our work through mentoring, research, so actually trying to, find out what is the evidence base for some of these questions and publicize that, and outreach and communication. And we work at the level of individuals, organizations, and we like to think we are also trying to have an impact on the larger system. So some of the things we do is we support individuals pursuing diverse pathways to conservation careers. We support learning within the center and outside the center. For example, we have led some research on the evidence for more stakeholder engagement in conservation, or the effects of it. We apply that learning to our organizational practices. For example, we're trying to continue to improve our hiring practices, the language we use in ads, where we advertise, how we interview. We're always working towards trying to make that better. And we advocate for change at larger levels. And so some of you may remember, we've been trying to create spaces for this discussion. Like there was an influential plenary at an ICCB meeting by Eleanor Sterling and Marcelo Bonta a few years ago. We have volunteered our time, folks from our center, for this kind of work at SCB. And so the work takes many kind of shapes. One thing we're doing, which I saw listed there a couple times, like acknowledge, we have a problem, talk about it, listen. So one of the things we're doing is creating space for those conversations within our staff. And so we just did a staff survey about what topics from DEI they were more interested in learning about, and what kind of modality they would like for that learning. Do we want to read an article and have lunch and discuss it? Do we want to bring in an expert and do a facilitated conversation? How often would you like to talk about it? And so in that way, we're kind of trying to create a comfortable, safe space where we can all learn, and it's just going to be ongoing as part of our work. That's just a kind of an overview of some of the things we're doing, but I'm sure you guys have other things to add.
Yeah. So also we saw that there were a lot of comments around just acknowledging that there's a problem, and I've heard feedback from white folks who've told me, I'm not sure as a white person what role do I have to play, or what should I say, or can I say something? We were having this conversation too, Jessa, last night, but with some other folks, and we need folks, white folks and white men, to stand up and make a comment and address the systems of inequity that we're seeing. So we need that allyhood. And I think that if white folks are even asking that question, there's a level of awareness too that they're respecting, their own identity in that conversation as well, which is important. Something else that I saw around pay, I think something very simple that we can all just commit to is if we're ever in the role of like a hiring position or a hiring selection committee, just post the pay and the salary range. That also helps in the systems of inequity and doesn't perpetuate that as much. I think something else very simple in hiring committees is just asking the question, what is your cultural competency around DEI? Like making that very important, putting that in the job description. If your organization values DEI, why shouldn't that be a part of the application process? Having some question related to that. I think there were a lot of suggestions that were up there that you guys helped us field. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciated the suggestions that were up there. Everything from dealing with microaggressions to, of course, as I said, dealing with white supremacy, and really making sure that as we think about diversifying, and that we make sure that there is a good home for folks to land in when we're diversifying. I had the pleasure of having breakfast yesterday with a woman with my same name, Jacqueline Scott, and who's here in Toronto, and she does this group, Black Outdoors, I believe the name of it is, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I actually had a picture of her that I would have shown if I had gotten the memo that we weren't doing presentations. So, but she was talking about her dissertation work around and with the topic of why are Black people afraid of the woods, and it was an interesting conversation because I was also thinking, it's the woods, but then also what's in the woods, what might be in the woods, what happens when we stand out, whether it's in an organization or in a park. I was invited to do a presentation at one of the national parks in Pennsylvania, and there were people who were members of that national park who rescinded their memberships because I was coming to speak there. And so, this is what happens when we go to the park, in a kind of somewhat funny situation. I went out to Standing Rock, and it was me and another African-American woman who were one of the only ones who were there that day. And when we were walking to where we were doing the march, then somehow, somewhere or another, she got kicked by a horse. And so it was so funny. But it was funny because she's like, here I am, a Black woman out here, and I'm the one who gets kicked by the horse. And so, but we were talking about just kind of, again, how rare it is that we're involved in these environmental spaces and how we stand out. So when things like that happen, even though she was somewhat jesting, they end up amplified in some way because you feel like you're already standing out, and there's kind of a rawness there. And so when things happen, you attribute it to standing out in those circumstances. And so people, and that's true whether they talk about even in horror movies, it's always a Black person who dies first or whatever. And so it's all, so people, there's this literally this kind of meme that kind of that gets established, and this norm and concern. But looking at that from a real practical standpoint in terms of what we need to do about it as organizations, I think, as we said, the suggestions that were put out there were very, very good ones, and we really do have to do some deep work around all of our isms, and not just around race, but around other isms as well, because we see the same pattern playing out in multiple ways. So they're doing the anti-oppression work. Specifically, one of the groups, as we talk about having white folks stand up for racial justice, there's a group called SURGE, Showing Up for Racial Justice, which is really a white-led organizing around racial justice. And so that's an example of, and there's ally groups around LGBTQ issues and so forth and so on. Within our organization, we're having a conversation as we're doing a living building for our headquarters, and we're talking about things like making sure that we have gender-neutral bathrooms and these kind of things. But in order for us to really do that in the right way, we have to have folks at the table and making decisions who are of the different groups that are being affected. We don't have any women who are pregnant now, but there was a woman who was pregnant before, and she talked about who gave birth before, and she talked about how there was no place for her to, no room for her to express her milk which is needed throughout the day if you're breastfeeding. And so diversity kind of comes across in all these different ways, and the inequities resulting from not having people at the decision-making table come across in all these different with all these different definitions of diversity. Who we're trying to make the table for.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. So I think it's time that we take some questions from the audience. I would love to invite you to come to 2 microphones we have on the side. I have a request that you make a question that maybe is as specific as you can, and if you want to, thank you, Jessa, and if you want to address it to a certain person. So I see a lot of people going to the microphone, trying not to push each other. But I think we are getting ready. Please go ahead. You mind telling us your name and where do you come from?
Hi, my name is Julia Leone. I'm a PhD student in Minnesota.
Excellent.
And we've recently had, in the last year, more of a push towards these DEI conversations and also actions. And one thing that came up that I found really kind of eye-opening as something that's happening and what do we do about it, is that the groups of people who are the minorities in our community express this feeling of, we appreciate all the conversations that are happening, but now we're overworked and we can't advance in our careers because we're being asked to be on all of the committees now, and there aren't enough of us, and we're the token minority, and suddenly we don't have time for our own research, we don't have time for our own advancement in our career, and it's actually also holding us back. And I'm wondering what are solutions for that when there's a desire to be helpful and to move forward, but it's actually sometimes counterproductive.
Yes, thank you so very much. So one of the images I was going to show in my pre-memo presentation was an image of literally my face with a bullseye over it, because that list of boards and so forth is, and those are just the ones that I said yes to out of the legion more that I had to say no to, and it's literally, I pulled an all-nighter 3 times in the past 10 days because it's just untenable. But yet you feel compelled to say yes because because people will then say later on, once they don't have that diversity in their whatever, they'll say, well, we tried, we asked Jackie, and it's like, and so one of the things that I'm actually doing to counter this situation is I've actually developed a database of people of color in environmental and climate justice, and now this is actually a PSA now. If anyone out here it has has a connection to someone who would accept a love offering, which is coming from my bank account for $200 to develop the website to get that posted, I would be extremely happy because I do not have that skill. But I do have a site waiting for it. And so that's really going to be my answer to the situation. And I have already put together a database of DEI consultants as well that I've already begun to circulate. But now this list of the database of the POC, people of color in environmental climate justice, is upwards of 100 people and growing. And these are people who can talk better than me because I'm an off-the-scale introvert, who contribute better in board meetings than I do because I'm grossly overwhelmed. So I get on the calls and I don't even have anything to say. Who are better staff people than I am because they maybe sleep 8 hours a night. So in all these different ways, but they're just not getting the visibility because NAACP just has that automatic visibility. So it's not that I'm any way more qualified or whatever, but I'm just literally that visible. And that's the only problem. And so to that, I would just say that it's just a matter of really helping to publicize that there's all these other people out there that can speak on these issues, who care, about these issues, and who would make great staff people, spokespeople, board members, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you.
Do you have something to add?
You guys want to take the
I think that maybe part of their exhaustion is the fact that we've moved so slowly on these matters as well. So I think it would be great to just have more people to select from, but how effective is that if the people who make decisions aren't really listening? So I think we need to address that as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because the other thing I'll say is that on Facebook now I have this kind of running awkward exchange chronicles about the various microaggressions I experience on a daily basis, and it does get wearing because they're microaggressions and sometimes macroaggressions, or at least meso. And so
Don't forget the mesoscale.
yeah, exactly. So it really does get extremely exhausting on top of the actual having to do this stuff. So this really gets back to doing that work around white supremacy and surge and so forth, so that there's more of a, and really thinking authentically about leadership and decision making. So there's more of a haven for folks when they want to step out into this work.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Wingrant. Oh, sorry.
Begging your permission, Ray. I just want to let everybody know that I am going to be walking around with a microphone in the concept of inclusivity in case people are not able to get up and move to a stationary microphone. I will be floating, so I will bring it over here because there's a line over here. But if you feel like you, for whatever reason, don't want to move to that microphone or can't, I will float so that we can bring you a microphone and we can hear your voice as well.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for this panel. It's really wonderful to see everyone up here speaking on these issues. I'm sure we all agree. First, quick shout out. Jacqueline on stage mentioned that the other Jacqueline Scott is around the conference. I just wanted to say that her talk is at 4 o'clock today about the fear that she's found that Black Canadians have about being in the woods. So you can attend and learn. I have a partially unfair question because it's speaking more from a global context than a North American context. But, our society is a global society. And it was more around the idea that very often we're talking about what we can do in our organizations, especially in the actual building space, right, where we operate and do a lot of our work. But so many of us in conservation are leaving the building to do field work, to implement conservation projects, and are widely Westerners going into spaces that are often, not always, but often non-Western. And my question to the panel is, any ideas, any suggestions, any visions for us as a global group of conservation scientists to learn how to or do better at sharing power with people? Because often we talk about including, but we don't always empower as we include, right? And so I am very concerned about power and about ability, about leadership, and even if it's just a vision of what that might look like, it would be helpful.
Thank you.
I would say if diversity is important to you, it's important to recognize that when you're engaging with people who are different from you, you're going to get different ideas, different perspectives, different mindsets, right? So you might be challenged, your ideas might be challenged, and I think it's really important to step back and consider that you may be wrong, or that there's another way of tackling XYZ challenge. So I think that from an individual standpoint, it's important when we talk about diversity that people who are really ready for that conversation are curious before furious. That's the phrase I like to say. Curious before furious. Respond from a place of curiosity.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, so in full disclosure, I was one of the judges for Kazmira Cockrell. Her group and in her presentation, and I was extremely impressed by kind of the ethos that was within her presentation, and the fact that throughout she quoted the folks who were from the nation that she was working in, which was Kenya, and so that just really, I mean, I was just so enamored of just the way she talked about the need for decision making and leadership for Kenyan nationals in their conservation work, and the way she was very concrete about the need to shift the resources need to be equated with the power is in resources, and that even if there's resources coming from outside, that there still needs to be decision making to rest with Kenyan nationals. And so even though she was coming in from the U.S. and spent however many months, 9 months, 10 months there, 7 months, I don't know. Anyway, she's not nodding, but so didn't guess right. But however many months there were, that she really got that, and she really had that ethos with the work that she was doing. I used to do work internationally, and I'm reminded of, and I was the assistant vice president for the organization, always at the head of the team that I was on. But whenever they would come to pick me up at the airport, they would have like the sign that would have my name, but when I would walk out, they would be looking behind me, like, sure, it wasn't me. It definitely wasn't me who could have been the person they were looking for. Like, there was just no way that someone who looked like me could have been the person who was the head of the team. And that really just struck me, and it just says a lot to that very question about like who is in leadership and who is in decision making. And so this is the importance of having models and ethos like what Kazmira demonstrated in the work that we do. We put out a publication called "And the People Shall Lead" that really puts across a number of principles for democratic organizing and for power shifting to folks who are from whether it's a community that you're going into in the U.S. context or a nation that you're going into someplace else. And so that it provides a number of principles, a number of examples of practices that haven't worked well in terms of those types of engagements, and where in the direction we need to go towards in terms of authentic relationships and authentic lifting up and following the leadership of the community or the country that we're visitors in.
Absolutely. And I'll just add that at the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation, where I work, we do everything in kind of authentic partnerships when we work internationally. We find partners in country, we dialogue about what their priorities and needs and curiosities are, and we design the project together whenever possible, depending on the funding, right? But the idea is that we're going to do the whole cycle of work together. We're going to learn from each other. We're going to do it all together, and in that way build each other's capacity as we go along. And so, for example, in our capacity development work, some of our teaching and training materials work that we've done, we always work with local leaders. We always work with local authors. We do things in the local language. You know, there's a lot of ways in which you can do that. But I'm sure it goes into every human interaction you have, actually.
Thank you for your patience, Dr. Singh.
No problem. Thank you. So I'm Gerald Singh. I'm the new board chair for EID in the North American section of SCB, so you can add me to your database.
Thank you. Absolutely. I'll write that down.
This is kind of a follow-up from one of the earlier questions regarding minorities being on committees and being overstretched. And it kind of dawns on me that a lot of the dynamics that really make for inequity can undermine potential solutions to it, right? So in that case, yeah, there's not a lot of minorities in kind of these positions, and so they put on committees, and that can limit their academic achievement and limit their ability to advance in their careers, right?
Yep.
I know that that kind of tokenism kind of undermines the intervention that's supposed to, help it. And that kind of stuff happens with affirmative action as well. It kind of cheapens the achievement. And so I was just wondering, from your guys' experience, what interventions work best and why?
Well, that's a big question. When you say what interventions work, what exactly do you mean? Like what interventions for?
I'm thinking primarily for equity, so like kind of leveling the playing field for opportunities.
Well,
So you mean in opportunities in any?
I think we a lot of them rolled up on the screen earlier, right? Like about pay and hiring practices and
Access.
Access. Is that what you have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking a lot in terms of, so maybe we can flip it on its head too. What kind of interventions should work but don't? Yeah.
Oh, I have so much experience with that. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm invited to a lot of boards. I'm invited to speak a lot of places. I am said, oh, you're the Mexican guy. You're just like, you're going to solve the border and everything. And those kind of things make me very angry. And so by the third time that I hear these things, even if it's the first time that I work with them, I'm very emotional. And so it's very draining. That's what I meant about the burden. It's part of the answer to that question is that this is personal work. We don't decide to go do equity from 8 to 5, and then we go home, and then we just turn the World Cup. Some of us do, but we still think about how angry and where it hurts where you hear certain things. Actually, there are issues right now from the German national team because of internal racism. It's coming out of there, and it's draining. It makes you tired having to address these things all the time. One thing that I've done is don't go, because I'm too angry to talk about it. I have to say no. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to sit at that session because I'm going to say things that you guys might not want to hear.
There was I'm sorry, this is a follow-up that's a little bit kind of unrelated, and I don't want to diminish in any way, like the power of what you're saying. I think there's a very personal layer to this. There was also a Harvard Business Review issue on diversity that collated all kinds of evidence on what is working and isn't working, and why. So there was a really interesting kind of comparative article about multiple approaches to working at the organization level on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so, for example, they were saying there are very mixed results about designating a diversity officer. And so that doesn't seem to work very well. There's different ways to, something you may want to read. How do you do that? So I would say there is evidence out there. Let's keep reading it and assessing all of this with a critical mind. Would you like to add?
Sure. Yeah. So another document that came out recently is Green 2.0. You may have seen that. Yeah. It's just in terms of the background. But the other thing I think is, I know I've already said this in terms of really developing, making the host organization more accommodating. One of my friends said a while back that as women of color, that we disproportionately have a history of, like a damaged work history, because we've either, spouted off at somebody when they've said something, or we've, basically swiped our desk and walked out, or we become so socially isolated in our workspaces because of these challenges that, we end up being, being moved out of an organization. And so you see that happening with different folks, especially when there's kind of multiple layers of oppression as women, as people of color, et cetera. And so the more that we make that we work on making sure the organizations are more hospitable and more accommodating to folks, then the more that there is that success and more equity in terms of getting into organizations, and then also moving up the ranks into decision making and power positions of power. I think the other thing is, to the extent that there are DEI officers and so forth at organizations, one of the things I've been pushing for is to actually have a DEI network of particularly within the green space, because definitely they have similar experiences, and I've seen too many folks who have very short tenures as DEI officers within their organizations because of these different dynamics. So I think there needs to be more outlet, more kind of sharing of best practices and so forth, and more just kind of crying together or yelling together, depending on the circumstances that they're in. So those are a couple things that I would definitely advise is really for organizations to work hard on their hospitality, you know what I mean? Hospitableness, no. But, and for us to have a better network for DEI folks, and for people in a lot of times people feel threatened by people of color caucusing, and so even within organizations or otherwise, and you'll get actually accused yourself of being divisive because you're just trying to survive this kind of what can be toxic environments, and so but folks really need that in order to be able to not only survive but thrive in those settings, and so we're social beings to the most extent of, though I'm off the chart introvert, but still, at some level, we're all social beings. And so so those are just some thoughts that I would have, definitely, that I've seen successes on.
A network, self-care.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I'm a PhD student right now at a university in the United States. And in a couple months, I am going to be starting a job in the U.S. federal government. Right now, my university is one of those that is so far refusing to acknowledge that we have a problem with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you all know something about the U.S. federal government. So I'm looking for advice as a fairly low-level person in my organization in terms of how to be an ally, how to forward DEI work in these organizations that are very resistant to change. Thank you.
Well, that's going to take 5 minutes.
One thing I would suggest is the Truman Project, which is a group of folks who are within the U.S. government who are interested in kind of social justice, really, and including DEI and otherwise. And so they come together and they talk about, again, best practices. They gripe about challenges, and they strategize about how to make things better within what can be pretty constrained and restrictive and sometimes oppressive environments. And so they talk about it from a standpoint of allyship, and there are also a number of people of color who are in the group themselves. And so that would be one example piece of advice I would give.
I have another example. There is a group out there called the Inclusive Allies Coalition, and they host weekly webinars, monthly webinars online, and they're very helpful. And they started, I believe, with those webinars after the election in 2016 in a way to say, how do we create spaces where we can talk across difference? How can we address? And you can go and see some of the slides or recordings from past webinars, and I think you will find it helpful. I'm trying to attend to learn myself, but I think it's helpful to have those touch points. The other thing I would say is to go with an open mind and assess your environment first, get to know people, listen. I realize that we all have assumptions about what you're going to find when you go into that new job, but who knows who will be in that community?
Right, because those career government officials may not be representative of the people who are at the top, who are selected by, the president. So I think it's really important that in your job that you even just make an effort to reach out to the people of color and just have coffee with them, or just help them to feel welcomed, and let them and cue in and allow them to cue in that you are an ally and that you're a friend, and that they may have some fears or concerns that you're not. And so you have to show up to work with your authentic self too, so that folks realize that, what your values are, and that will help them feel welcome there as well.
Great. We're nearing the end, and I feel horrible about people waiting. Let's do the last one. Will you forgive me if we only do the last one?
Thank you. My name's Jen Smith. I work with the province of British Columbia. in the Fish and Wildlife branch, and as you can imagine, traditionally there's a very flat demographic that I work with. And so I would like your opinion, your advice on different training, different resources, different suggestions when I experience situations that I would really like to say to someone, you need to check your white privilege when you're talking to an Indigenous community or someone who is not older white male. So instead of just going out and saying, check your white privilege, what are nicer ways of saying that?
We don't know.
Wait, maybe the audience has suggestions.
Ooh.
I mean, I could come up with something on the spot, but I don't think that's very valuable to anybody. I'm sure we could think through it and have more conversations. I do think the Inclusive Allies Coalition webinars can help you find some of that language. I really do. If you check it out. Say that louder.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can continue the conversation during the lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing, I was going to say, because those things happen to me almost on a daily basis, and those observations and those experiences, I mean, I've had to kind of hone some ways of having those conversations. And in particular, so it's hard also being a person of color sometimes, because then people, so it would be interesting to see what the difference would be as you do it. But sometimes I would say, even to friends, like, something like, if I heard that and I was someone else, this is how I might, how I might receive it. So just so you know, with a very kind of, kind of humble and, kind of way, I'll say it like that.
Or try to make I statements instead of you statements, right? Instead of you are doing this, you can be, I felt this way when you did that. And I think for the next meeting, I would like to feel more comfortable. Can we talk about how we can make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so that's so I think that if there was something that was directed towards me, it's kind of one thing, but sometimes when I hear it, when I'm observing, like you were saying before, observing when something happening to someone else, I would maybe say, if I were in the shoes of what, kind of make it external to myself, but use I statements. Like, if I were in this situation, this is how I would feel, or this is how I would receive what you said. It is definitely interesting when it actually happens to you and you have to respond. But that's a whole other set of tools and responses.
I want to highlight the comment earlier about the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Committee meeting starting in a few minutes at noon at Pier 9. And I'm not sure if our panelists will join us there, but please continue having this conversation and share with the committee your interest and if you would like to be part of the committee or if there's ideas that you would like to bring up. And I will invite people who were waiting for questions to approach the panelists at the end and come and ask your question or take a little time a little later. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to say your 250-character closing remarks.
Well, to help answer the last question, I think once you frame your conversation is in a way that whoever you're talking to sees DEI as important to their work and destructive if they don't understand those DEI principles, I think that can go a long way in winning over their support as well. But my closing words would be a reflection actually in what I learned in the Black in Biodiversity session that happened yesterday. Dr. Ray Wynn Grant had made an incredible remark that I'll always remember. She said, "Everyone here cares about science. You can't care about science without caring about the scientist. And if we care about all scientists, we must acknowledge the importance of DEI."
Nice. Thank you.
That's great.
Excellent.
Yeah, that session had, I actually liked another quote from that session. I liked many, but there was a discussant at the end, Dr. Henry, and I can't remember her first name, I'm sorry. She said, institutions are not just buildings, they are systems of thought. And I thought, we're all in institutions. How are we part of that system of thought? Let's think about that.
I think I would just close with emphasizing and upholding models like the urban ecology centers that are out there, whether it's the one in Milwaukee. I heard another one speaking, I can't remember where it was yesterday, and really emphasizing engaging youth early on so that we groom leadership, so that we have the people with the skills and with the orientation and so forth to be leaders in this field. I would put that at the top of my list of things to do.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. You know that we are recording this to post it on the YouTube channel later. I want to apologize for the lack of the memo on the presentation.
No, that's okay.
But I would like to open the opportunity to say that if you would like to add any resources or anything in that YouTube presentation, I think we can do it there.
Okay, that sounds
so
great. Yeah.
I apologize.
No,
but I hope
it
that we
wasn't
can share
your.
that.
No. I was.
And thank you, everyone. Muchas gracias, everybody, for being here. I hope that you will attend the meeting next. And I hope that you will continue to have these conversations and listen to these conversations and agree on these conversations. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, do it. Yeah. So, Jessa, hello. This is going to give us a quick...
Thank you. Sorry, one moment. I know that sounded like a closing, and it was, but one moment. Sergio has been generous enough to allow us just a second. So if you haven't seen my face up here before in freakishly large size, I'm Jessa Madosky. I'm the president of the North America section, and this is Mike Masha, who is the president of SCB Global. And we just wanted to say one word pertaining to this sort of acknowledging the issue. So I'll let Mike go first.
Hi, everybody. Mike Masha. So I lead the science program for Conservation International based in Washington, D.C. I'm also the president of the Society for Conservation Biology Board. And I've been involved in the society since 1997. And I just wanted to say thank you to the speakers, to the organizers, and to all of you for being part of this conversation. It's deeply gratifying to me to see the evolution of the society and the opportunity for us to have this conversation and to chart a path for conservation science and practice globally through our efforts. I am deeply gratified that we are having this conversation in the North America context, but also informing conversations globally, because this is not simply a North America issue. And that we're thinking both about those who are doing the conservation science and practice, but then also those who are affected by conservation science and practice. We've been working a lot with Whitney Tome, Executive Director of Green 2.0, to strengthen and advance our own efforts. And I look forward to working with all of you, including the speakers, to strengthen the society and more generally the field as a whole. So thank you.
And from the North America perspective, anyone who's had a long engagement with me knows that I'm very passionate about these issues, and I tried really hard to bring that forward in my presidency, but I also recognize that these issues are incredibly pervasive and that I and everyone around me still has a lot to learn. And so I just want to say that the section is really trying, but also recognizes that we're not there yet and we're a long way from there. So we would, I personally would really value hearing any suggestions you have for improvement. So please do reach out to me with those suggestions. And there will be a panel actually later today, a symposium, in which I will actually be talking on what are the efforts that are going on in the North America section and what are some of the things we've done, along with some of the places that I see personally some opportunities for growth and where we need to be heading next. So thank you all. It's amazing to see this crowd and everybody's participation. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to our panelists and Sergio for letting us steal a little bit of your time.
Thank you.
Oh, and Suzanne for running the thingy. Now lunch.